later. All right, perfect. Take it away.
All right. Well, hello everyone. I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about phylopsy.org. My name is Gabriela Venable, or Gabby, and I am a PhD candidate in the Brian Hare Lab at Duke University. I also happen to be the assistant director of PhyloPsy. And PhyloPsy is a new free resource to help researchers interested in collaborations in on animal cognition and behavior. So today I'm going to be focusing on why PhyloPsy is a great tool for cross-species studies, but really this is a tool that almost anyone who studies animal cognition and behavior could use because what it does essentially is it allows researchers to propose a project and find potential collaborators with access to the species that they might need. So maybe you would like, for instance, a slightly larger sample size for your study. Well, you could use PhyloPsy to find collaborators with the species you study. All right. So for today's talk, I'm going to be covering three different points. I'm going to talk more about why PhyloPsy is a needed tool for comparative psychology from a cross-species perspective. I'll also talk about how this online resource works, and then I'll talk about a new project we've recently launched on the site. And part of this is actually going to cover my dissertation work. So I'll go over some data I collected for a literature survey looking at the state of the field of comparative psychology for completing large-scale comparisons, looking at data from articles published between 2019 and 2023. And then I'm going to be talking about a pilot study that we're now expanding into a broader PhyloPsy project for which I collected data on 10 different species of lemur at the Duke Lemur Center. So jumping right in, given that not necessarily everyone here might have a background in comparative psychology or may even study cognitive evolution, I want to talk about what I mean by evolution. And when I'm talking about this term, I'm talking about variation. So the way I like to talk about this usually is I show this picture from the National Geographic photo arc. What's incredibly striking is the degree of variation we see across species. And that variation extends beyond morphological features or these physical features we can see here in these photos. It also includes a great deal of cognitive variation and behavioral variation. So the natural question that follows is, where did all this variation come from? And that is the question at the heart of the study of cognitive evolution. So why do we see all this variation across species in terms of cognition? When we think about this question, we also need to think about how we study it. So generally in comparative psychology, we'll study one or a few species at a given time in order to better understand how elements of their evolutionary history might have given rise to their cognition today. So I like to bring up the example from our lab, who, along with other labs, has done fantastic work comparing dogs and wolves in order to better understand how domestication might have given rise how domestication might impact cognitive evolution. And I should say this smaller scale comparative research is really important. It allows us to develop hypotheses about how cognition or behavior might evolve and provide some evidence for those hypotheses. But if we want to then generalize across more species, we need to study many more species at the same time. So, for instance, maybe I want to see if the results we see in dogs and wolves extends to canids, or the dog family, or to carnivores, or to mammals, or across all vertebrates. In that case, what we would need is a much larger cross-species study. But these types of studies are fairly rare. And I'll talk about how rare in a second. And you might be wondering why. Well, there's several reasons why, but I'm only going to talk about three because those are three potential barriers that I looked at for my dissertation work. So these three potential barriers are the diversity of species studied as a field, the number of comparative studies completed, and collaborative efforts, especially large-scale collaboration. So if we want to complete larger scale comparative species, we need as a field to have access to many different species that we can study. We also need these smaller scale comparative studies that I mentioned before, not only to develop hypotheses, but also because they're critical for determining methods that work across species, including distantly related species. And then we need collaboration, of course, because usually a lab only has access to one or a few species, meaning that if we want to study many species at once, we're also going to want to involve many labs. And so these are the elements that I looked at. I reviewed 5 years of literature from 5 different journals. And just diving right into those results, we as a field are actually studying a huge variety of species. We're studying over 400 different species, or at least that was what I found in the results of the studies I looked at. And yes, there are some taxonomic biases that remain. So you can see the 5 most studied species here with their silhouettes. We can also see that mammals, particularly primates, as well as birds, appear to be better represented in the literature in comparison to fish or reptiles. But we should know this is amazing progress that has been made, and that having access as a field to all of these species really means that we can start thinking about these larger scale comparative studies. That being said, we do need more cross-species studies to be completed. About a fifth, actually a little less than a fifth of the studies that I looked at had results pertaining to more than one species. And in the case of larger scale comparative research, so we're going to look at that lighter olive color, the 7 plus, this was very rare. So less than 1% of literature was looking at many, many species at once. This percent has remained fairly constant for the years I looked at. However, we do see a slight dip in the last 2 years there, 2022 and 2023, which might be an artifact from the pandemic, but could also show that there might be a slight decrease actually going on in terms of the amount of cross-species studies that are being completed. So we really do need more cross-species studies right now as a field. And I argue that the reason why we don't have as much comparative studies is because there is not that much, or because we need more collaboration. So as I mentioned before, it's kind of intuitive that if we want to study many species at once, we often need the involvement of many different labs, given that a lab might only have access to one or a few species, or an animal facility only might have access to a few species. And so I wanted to validate that with the data that I looked at. And so I looked at whether or not an article included data collected across multiple locations or different populations of animals, different animal facilities, or at least reported that they did. And as you can see, as the number of species represented in a study goes up, it is more likely that the data was collected in multiple different locations. However, as the number of species goes up, we don't see necessarily that the number of institutional affiliations of the authors also goes up. And so what this might show is that often it's one given lab that's taking on the brunt of the responsibility traveling around, and that really does make it harder to complete this type of work. The one outlier here with the 7 plus category was many primate study. But otherwise, we see that for the most part, there's a similar amount of institutional affiliations regardless of the number of species studied. So we really do need more collaboration, especially if we want to complete more of these larger scale multi-species studies. But it's not all doom and gloom. I like to actually say that this is a promising future. You know, it's only recent that we've begun to see this diversity of species being studied. And now what that is signaling is we have access to the species that we need to complete these studies. All we need now is to now turn our focus a little bit more towards completing more comparative cross-species studies and begin to maybe collaborate a little bit more, especially in terms of large-scale collaboration. And fortunately, within comparative psychology, we've seen a lot of different efforts to do this type of collaborative work with the ManyX projects. I have a few of them listed here, but not all of them. And usually how these projects work is a team of researchers come together. So ManyX projects represents a team usually, and they come together to work on one or a few given projects at a time. And they also usually focus on one taxa. So many primates, many birds, etc. And this type of work has allowed us to find, has allowed us, I should say, to have a better understanding about how cognition evolves and where this variation is coming from. However, we still need a few more we still need to think about a few more things. We need to think about what do we do if we want to compare distantly related taxa? Or what if we want to look at a taxa that's not well represented yet by one of the ManyX projects? Or what if we want to do a smaller scale project that maybe is not require the same scope as one of these ManyX collaborations? What if we just want more, an additional species or a few extra species to study? Well, there's a few different options. So you could go create your own ManyX project. You could join the Many, which is a great group. I really recommend joining them. So they're a team of researchers that look at many different distantly related taxa to focus on one research question of interest. But I'm also hoping that after today especially, maybe you'd consider PhyloPsy. And PhyloPsy, again, it's a free online resource. To use it, all you need is to create a membership, so to answer a few questions. And the way PhyloPsy works is it allows researchers to propose projects and find potential collaborators with access to the animal populations or species that they may need. And in the context of cross-species studies, we also have some of the leading phylogeneticists or people who study phylogenetic comparative methods who are also on the site and that can help you for analyzing your data for larger scale cross-species studies. To summarize how PhyloPsy works, I can use these three verbs: propose, find, collaborate. So maybe you have a research question you've always been interested in, but maybe don't have the right species or populations necessary to study that question. Well, you can use our proposed project feature and detail what that project would look like, and then find. Then you can find potential collaborators with access to the animal species or populations you need for your study. Or maybe you have access to a really interesting species, or any species really, and you're looking for other projects you could join onto. Well, you could use our search engine and look for projects, potential collaborators, animal populations, and skilled phylogeneticists. Again, researchers that can help you analyze your larger scale comparative data. And then together you can collaborate. We have guides for researchers who are interested in these larger scale collaborations but might not know where to start. And we also have a contact feature where you can reach out to potential collaborators, as well as a request to join button where you can let researchers know that you're interested in joining onto their collaborative project. And Here is a picture from the website. You can see this if you create your membership. Again, this is free to use. Just have to answer a few questions. But as you can see at the top, you can see our lovely search bar where you can look for projects, people, institutions, and species. If you look up species, you will need to use the land name. And it will take just a second. It's a really powerful tool, but it does take just a second. There's a little lag. And this is an example of what a project looks like. So our lab collaborated with many primates 3 this summer. We collected data on fox and dwarf lemurs. And then we helped put this project up on PhyloPsy. So you can see what species or what types of animals they're looking for their study. You can see a description of the study, and you can also see a video detailing the methods that you would use, links to project files, including a memorandum of understanding, which is like an informal contract that you would want collaborators to follow. And then what's really cool is over here on the right, you can see the collaborators that are on this project. And what progress they've made and what species they're collecting data in. So I've gone through and filled in the gaps. So where people haven't quite yet come and claimed the species they're studying. I have this here just to show what this project site would look like. So please, if you are a part of Many Primates, go and go and claim your species that you've studied, or go insert what species you study so we can show all the wonderful work that everyone's doing for Many Primates 3. So currently we have over 100 members representing 45 institutions from 16 different countries and 59 species. We really want anyone with access to any populations of animals to join, but it would be great if we could get some more fish and reptile people, given that we have very few of such animals on the site. And I also like to point out that we've got people from all parts of their academic trajectory, and that we are hopeful that it will be the merit of the project itself that's proposed rather than where in their academic journey person is that will get people motivated to join on. Okay, so speaking of projects, I would like to talk about a project that I have recently launched on the site. And it's based off of some of my dissertation work. I did a pilot study looking at 10 different species of lemur at the Duke Lemur Center, specifically on the relationship between shy-boldness and cognitive evolution. And I'm going to show some preliminary results from 7 of those species of lemur. For this project, we have 3 research questions of interest. Do temperament traits evolve according to some of the same selective forces thought to impact cognition, such as sociality and diet? Is temperament related to brain size? And how is temperament related to cognition? Given that I'm going to run out of time soon, I'm going to focus on the first and third question here. And the reason why I became so interested in this topic is because often when we think about cognitive evolution and natural selection, we think about diet and sociality and their potential roles as selective factors during cognitive evolution. However, diet and sociality also appear to be related to temperament and could be selective pressures during temperament evolution. And temperament also appears to be related to cognition and may affect how cognition is expressed. Therefore, maybe we need to start talking about temperament when we talk about how cognition evolves. And I specifically decided to study shy-boldness, i.e. reaction to novelty, which is a key temperament trait, because when looking through the literature, I noticed it had been studied in a large variety of different species. And in many of these species, we saw that there was actually that it was actually a heritable trait. It's also really easy to collect this data. So again, I collected this data in 10 different species of lemur, ranging from the tiny, tiny mouse lemur, actually the size of a mouse, to the ii, which is fairly large, very explorative, as well as a large range of diurnal species. And the way these methods essentially work, they're similar to, I think it was Miller et al. 2020. I might have the date wrong on that, but the study of neophobia in corvids. Where an individual has about 10 minutes to approach two different choices, one that is a familiar stimulus or one that is a novel stimulus. And then we measure order to approach as well as time to approach both choices. Um, and we have three different types of novelty in our experiment. We have novel object, novel food, and novel social agent in order to better look at context, I should say, to better look at context specificity. And then for our cognition data, we're using data already collected by McLean et al. 2014 on self-control and by many primates et al. 2022 looking at short-term memory. In cases where the data wasn't already collected, I went in and tried to fill in the gaps. So jumping right ahead, um, so it does appear so far with my preliminary results that diet and sociality might correlate with shy-boldness. So these are preliminary results from 8 different species of lemur using phylogenetic generalized least squares, which are like generalized least squares, except you control for the degree of relatedness between species. All right, and so what we see is that species that are more folivorous versus frugivorous appear to be shyer, um, and that they're more likely to avoid novel objects during trials. We also see that species with smaller group sizes appear to be bolder, and that they're more likely to approach the novel object first over the familiar choice. We also found that our shy-boldness measures correlated at least with a measure of self-control, but not short-term memory. So species that were bolder or less likely to avoid novelty during trials also performed better in the cylinder task, but there was no such correlation for short-term memory. And I keep saying these are preliminary results, not only because I haven't finished coding my data, but also because we're hoping to extend this across more species. So hopefully some of you here today might consider joining on to this project. So to summarize, what I've found is that diet and sociality may correlate with shy-boldness, meaning that these could be selective pressures during shy-boldness evolution, and also that shy-boldness appears to be related maybe to certain cognitive abilities, but not necessarily all. If you're interested in joining, I have this QR code on the screen. I'm going to skip through though because I'm almost out of time. It will appear again. I have a lot of people to thank, but want to leave some time for questions. So I'm just going to quickly thank my advisor, Brian Hare, as well as Emma Nelson, Josh Seabow, and the wonderful team of undergrads that helped me collect this lemur data, as well as all of my funding sources. All right, but if anyone has some questions, I'd love to answer them. And I do see some in the chat right now, but also you can feel free to reach out to me in that email there. Okay. Awesome. I don't know how we want to go about this. So I answer questions in the
Sure.
chat first, or
Go nuts. So I think Protzko is asking if he can enroll his small people, would be my assumption. But looks like Heather's question might be more serious. Yeah. So how do you manage the database created between the connections between people, basically?
so that is up to the person who has proposed the study. So we are a tool to help you find collaborators and to help organize your collaborative project. So we recommend that people use, for instance, Google Drive. But yeah, that is definitely up to the person. So this is just a tool for proposing projects and finding collaborators. Um, Many authors could be enrolling. Well, I'm not sure what the question is saying, but yes, if we would love to have many authors on PhyloPsy, and they could definitely participate in this study as well.
All right, and then for my own selfish reasons. Oh, Heather, you go first.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for the interesting talk. I'm driving, so sorry for the random questions. Um, just to kind of, we have a similar thing with dolphins, but it's a group that works together, and then we manage a database on the back end, and then we connect individuals. But I also am part of the Many Otters team, and so what I'm hearing is to understand how this works without having looked at it yet. You go to the database, you put your information in, you do a search, and then hopefully somebody else connects with you at the same time to see if you have the same sort of interest. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, so there's that, and also you can propose a project. So yeah, so maybe you don't have anything fully set up to propose yet, and you could just reach out to other researchers who are interested in what you're doing. But also you can propose a project on the site if you have a description and methods already set up. So something here like with many primates, where there's a more detailed project that's there. And then you can start finding people who can join onto the project. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. So if we were to enroll as the Many Otters project, which we already have kicked off the first project, we could connect it to our webpage and or the Many Otters project protocol, and then
Yes.
see if we are able to interact with it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, so my own selfish reasons before I have to jump to the next one. Savannah and I, who run the PSA, inherited Study Swap from Chris Cartier. And so I've been working on some software in the background that's like a project management software. But one of our ideas was actually what you have just said, basically having this kind of study swap availability, but for all kinds of studies. So people could propose, people could say, here are my skill sets, and they could kind of match each other. So I wrote down to email you later and see if there's maybe an API or something we could write where yours could cross post to what we're doing to get more coverage. So that would take people back to your site to manage. But I really love the way this looks as well. So I will probably send you an email to pick your brain on like the site and how it looks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, please feel free to reach out. We just want to make this resource available for people. We have a good deal of funding for the site. It just hasn't quite been used yet. If, for instance, someone needs help proposing a project on the site, we can help you set it up. We did so for many primates. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I will send you a message. Unfortunately, we are out of time because I have to jump to the next one, but great job. This looks super fascinating. I hope that a lot of people pick it up for you because it's a super cool idea. Um, and thank you for presenting this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right.